Otto von Bismarck's domestic policies. Otto von Bismarck was a Prussian statesman who served as the Prime Minister of Prussia between 1862 and 1890. He was the founder and first Chancellor of the German Empire. Bismarck's influence on Germany and how it was viewed by the rest of Europe succeeded far beyond his time as an influential leader. He can be seen as the pioneer of the unification of Germany, revolutionizing Prussian economy and military. Once the German Empire was established, he actively and skillfully pursued Pacific policies in foreign affairs with numerous facets of success. However, in domestic policies, his bequest was less agreeable, for he failed to further unify the German people by creating disunity with the Kulturkampf, creating long-lasting enemies of the German Empire, which could be seen as a predecessor of Germany's circumstances in the First World War, and his instability between advocation with the liberals and the socialists. Bismarck's domestic policies were a sentiment of failure, as he was unsuccessful in meeting many of his goals and resigned with a lack of prominent domestic policies for his successors to follow. One of the aspects of failure in Bismarck's domestic policies was the Kulturkampf. In 1870, Pope Pius IX introduced the papal infallibility doctrine, in which the Catholics' loyalty to the Church was established. Both Bismarck and the liberals shared ideologies in the sense of a further unified Germany, and saw this as a threat to that ideology, thus resulting in the formation of the Kulturkampf. The Kulturkampf refers to German policies put in place in order to reduce the power of the Roman Catholic Church in Prussia. Discriminatory laws that made Catholics feel understandably persecuted within a predominantly Protestant nation were put in place. During this time, Bismarck sought to appeal to liberals and Protestants, whom together made up the majority, by reducing the social and political influence of the Catholic Church. The German population included 16 million Protestants and 8 million Catholics, allowing for a massive political influence of the Catholics that dominated the southern states. It was seen that Protestants were the main supporters of Bismarck and his policies. The Kulturkampf, along with the May laws, advocated the control of education, which was now to be run solely by the state, as well as the promotion of civil marriage. The Centre Party was then formed in order to defend the interests of the Catholic Church. The laws enforced gave the German population the option of either supporting the state or their religion. This ultimatum led to the failure of the Kulturkampf. This was prominent as in 1874 the Centre Party had doubled its vote in the Reichstag elections and was a key party in German politics, contradictory to what Bismarck had aimed for. Another facet of failure in Bismarck's domestic policies was socialism and the Social Democratic Party. In 1875, revolutionary socialists formed the Social Democratic Party, also known as the SDP, with the mixed ideologies of Ferdinand Lassalle and Karl Marx, therefore adopting the fundamental aspects of the Marxist goal of a classless society. This appealed to the extensive working class, who would benefit from the eradication of autocracy. Nationalization of banks, wealth redistribution, and social equality posed as a threat to everything Bismarck sought to preserve within the German society. Thus, in 1878, he introduced an anti-socialist law which banned SDP meetings and publications. Another facet of his anti-socialist goal was state socialism, in which he aimed to appeal to the working class by advancing the conditions of the workers. The sickness insurance law, old age pensions, as well as the accident insurance law were introduced between 1883 and 1889. Many of Bismarck's opponents accused him of using this social policy as an implementation for canvassing votes. This created skepticism, and despite his actions against the Social Democratic Party, once the law expired in 1890, the party grew rapidly and won 20% of the popular vote, making them the most prominent opposition of the government. This is another representation of a failure in Bismarck's domestic policies. Bismarck's failure to consolidate Germany's power after the financial crisis and creation of long-term enemies with foreign powers is another example of a failure in his domestic policies. Subsequent to the financial crisis in 1873, in which scandals amongst the railway businesses and overconfidence in manufacturing projects resulted in an economic crash in Germany and relatively the rest of Europe, Bismarck had to balance his economic ideologies between the liberals and the conservative Junkers. The liberals were in favor of free trade, whilst on the other side, the Junkers wanted to revert to protectionism. Bismarck abandoned the national liberals and adopted protectionism, hoping to increase revenue of the state whilst decreasing dependency on the member states and the Reichstag. Although he increased the state's profit, Bismarck failed in relation to financial independence from the Reichstag. After the Commune of Paris in 1871, Bismarck had evolved an obdurate hatred for socialists and anarchists. He wrote, "They are this country's rats and should be exterminated," as well as "a host of enemies bent on pillage and murder." Hence, he brought forward a crude and repugnant discourse into German politics, which has seen to be long-lived within Germany's history. Bismarck resigned in 1890 with a sentiment of failure, with few distinguished domestic policies for his successors to follow. This negatively impacted the legacy Bismarck was to leave behind. The following excerpt was taken from Otto von Bismarck's famous Iron and Blood speech. The position of Prussia in Germany will not be determined by its liberalism, but by its power. Prussia must concentrate its strength and hold it for the favorable moment which has already come and gone several times. Since the treaties of Vienna, our frontiers have been ill-designed for a healthy body politic. Not through speeches and majority decisions will the great questions of the day be decided. That was the great mistake of 1848 and 1849, but by iron and blood. This is an excerpt from Otto von Bismarck's Iron and Blood speech, given in 1862 about the unification of the German territories. The purpose of this speech was to address the crisis which was taking place in Prussia when the Landtag was refusing to approve increased military spending in defiance of the king's wishes. It reached such an extent that King Wilhelm II considered abdicating the throne. Bismarck was appointed acting chief minister of Prussia and made an appearance at the Landtag, expressing his regret at their actions. This is a valuable source, as it is in the point of view of Bismarck himself and expresses his thoughts and opinions firsthand. Due to this, we know that there are no factors of miscommunication involved. This is an expression of Bismarck's opinion and shows us where he stood in relation to the specific situation. We are able to note Bismarck's tactfulness and success in public speaking with reference to his ability to influence the public. Limitations to this source would be the public nature of the speech. Because of this, Bismarck would have been more political in his statements. This may not represent his true opinion, as he was making a concerted effort to be diplomatic. Bismarck made this speech with the goal of influencing the Landtag, which would hold stature to his words, and this excerpt must therefore be viewed with the possibility of bias. Historians have had many opinions about Otto von Bismarck throughout the years. Some of these include that Bismarck's dominant characteristic was the will to his power, that he changed the face of Germany and Europe, that his quest for power found its satisfaction in those years in domestic affairs, with attacks upon the center and social democratic parties, and his manipulation of the conservative and liberal parties. That he was a successful politician and tactician, that he repressed democracy, and was a premier leader in all of Europe in the 19th century, as well as an esteemed diplomat. Some historians have believed that Bismarck encouraged the great powers, excluding France, to become dependent on the goodwill Germany was offering and tried to neutralize some of their issues against one another through a balancing of discontents. Others have believed that though it appeared Bismarck sought to dissolve the tensions among the great powers, in actuality this was not his aim. It has also been said that Bismarck pitted his main focus on foreign affairs, which is where his greatest successes lay. All of these facts are somewhat agreeable in my opinion. Bismarck was a successful diplomat and tactfully managed situations between foreign powers and knew how to manipulate situations resulting in his favor. The success of Bismarck's foreign policies provide a contrast to the perceived failures in his domestic policies. His actions changed and affected the history of Germany, and had a fundamental effect on the surrounding European powers. In conclusion, Otto von Bismarck resigned in 1890 with a sentiment of failure in relation to the facets of his domestic policies. He failed to further unify the German people, and adversely created disunity amongst the population with the culture camp and anti-socialist ideologies. Lastly, his failure to consolidate Germany's power after the financial crisis added to this consecutive pattern of shortfall, and concluded the failure of his domestic policies.